we're gonna open this up in a good way. First, I wanted to be sure that we had some medicine out, and so I have a little bit of sage. And yep, I'm just gonna open us up in a good way. Nasikam, iku, and chikuda, chikunya vopoi, chikunya nant, chikunya ibada. Creator, open our minds, our eyes, our ears, and our hearts. Let us take in all that is meant for us today. Let us present ourselves in the best possible way, present the best possible versions of ourselves. Today and always, guide us in our continued growth. Give us strength when speaking on the hardships in our communities. When bringing light to others, help us to remember to keep some for ourselves, taking care of the younger versions of ourselves, the current versions of ourselves, and the future versions of ourselves as we're consistently evolving. Let us continue to honor that balance, the balance of the land, the balance of our heart, and balance of our communities. Let us always walk in beauty. Let us continue to be good people. Mosapa.
So my name is Anagali Duncan. I am from Northeast Oklahoma, more specifically the Cherokee Reservation. And yeah, I'm a sophomore at Stanford University. Thank you.
Hi, I Skriktash, Anya Napchugig, Jukmat, Mergan Chugig, Caitlin Martinez, Anya Amjad Gutki. Hello, my name is Caitlin Martinez. I am from the Hill River Indian community, residing in Sackatoon, Arizona, and it is an honor to be here. Thank you.
Wai Haskaha Isquis Swananahua Kiana. Hello and good day. My name is Sydney Matheson. My traditional name is Rainbow Girl. I am an enrolled member of the Caldwell Confederated Tribes out of North Central Washington State. I also am a student through Arizona State University, and I am here today as a Tribal Youth Resource Center Youth Ambassador.
Good morning from Alaska. Hello, my name is James John. I'm from Kipnik, Alaska. I'm an Office on Violence Against Women Youth Coordinator here for the Office on Violence Against Women.
Hello everyone, I'm Kobe Whitelander. I hail from the Alabama Infrastructure Tribe in Texas. I am a youth aide here for my tribe, and I'm also a youth ambassador for the Tribal Youth Resource Center.
Hello, my name is Sam Schimmel. I'm Canadian Siberian Yupik from Kenai, Alaska, but right now I'm in Washington, D.C., where I'm a law student. Thank you so much for being able to take the time to be with us today, and we've got a series of questions and are really looking forward to the discussion with you. Thanks for being here.
So today we have the esteemed pleasure of talking to a longtime youth advocate, Liz Ryan, who joined OJJDP as administrator on May 16th, 2022. Appointed by President Joe Biden, Administrator Ryan brings more than 30 years of professional experience in legislative and justice-related issues, including more than 2 decades spent as an advocate for juvenile justice reform. We had the pleasure of building community with her back in December at the TYRC National Conference, and she has agreed to be a guest on this podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's great to see you all, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Administrator Ryan, for being here with us today. In a brief detail, could you tell us about your job as the administrator for the OJJDP, or otherwise officially known as the Office of Juvenile and Justice Delinquency Prevention?
Yes, thank you, Colby. That's a great question. So my job as the administrator is to oversee OJJDP's operations and to ensure that we advance our mission. And our mission is to ensure that contact with the justice system is rare. And when it does happen, that it's fair and that it's beneficial. So my job on a daily basis, I work with our leadership team and with our staff to help administer the grant funding that we have that starts from prevention all the way through reentry. And so I spend a lot of time working with our staff and our leadership team on grants, but I also work with our team to look at what are ways we can improve the work that we're doing. How can we increase communication with stakeholders? How do we think about our policy work? And what kind of research do we want to support, as well as communication? So there's lots of strategies that we employ at OJJDP, and I'm working with our team on all of that. The good thing is that I get to work with a really terrific team of people who are caring and committed and deeply invested in ensuring that our young people have access to opportunities. So it's an honor for me to serve in this role, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all about what I'm doing every day.
Well, once again, thank you for being here, and that's quite amazing. You know, we always need somebody out there ensuring that young people, especially Native young people, are getting what they deserve and that their interests have somebody representing them. So that you've created as the administrator for OJJDP.
Thanks, Sam. So when I came on board at OJJDP, I created a working group called the Youth and Family Partnership Working Group, because OJJDP, while we've been around for almost 50 years, we haven't necessarily partnered with young people in a very sort of comprehensive way. So I created this working group to look at all of OJJDP's operations. What are the meaningful points of entry where we can partner with young people across the board? And that's partly because we need to walk the walk. If we're asking the field to partner with directly impacted young people, we need to be doing it ourselves. So one of the first things I did was create the working group. The working group came up with a number of recommendations, and so we are implementing those recommendations. The first one was to look at all of the grant funding that we put out there and to include a provision in the application that says you have to tell us how you're working with directly impacted youth and their families. So if you are an applicant looking for funding from OJJDP, one of the things you have to tell us is how are you working with young people and their families, so that we are then resourcing those grantees that will in fact work with youth and families. We also put together a resource page on our website with an extensive library of sort of best practices in partnering with youth and families. But we also know that this is something that we have to talk with young people and hear from young people directly. So we're talking with young people like yourselves, youth in other parts of the country, and with families to learn more about what is it that we can be doing. A couple of opportunities that have come up in addition to what I just mentioned is that we have what's called the Federal Advisory Committee on Juvenile Justice, and that's something that's required by the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act. We are seeking applications right now for people to serve on that. The way that the statute is defined, you have to be already sitting as a sitting member on the state advisory group in order to serve on that. So young people who are state advisory group members can apply to serve on that. We also hope through that process to create some subcommittees where we can hear from a broader set of stakeholders across the country, and particularly from youth and their families. So I'm committed to making sure that that process is one that operationalizes our stakeholder engagement and partnership, most particularly with young people and their families. We also, for the first time this year, we piloted, and I say piloted because it's kind of, that means, you know, sort of trying something out and seeing if it works. As I mentioned, we have all these grants. We have a group of people who are called peer reviewers who will review the grants and make recommendations about what we should fund. Young people have never really been part of that mix. And so we invited young people to apply to serve as peer reviewers. Now, we only did that for a very small number of grants and with a limited number of people. so that we could kind of try it out and see what does it really take to really partner effectively with young people as peer reviewers. So I'm looking forward to learning about the ways that we can significantly enhance that so more young people can participate and more of our grants will have young people who want to serve as peer reviewers. Now, recognizing those aren't the only ways that young people want to participate with us, we are organizing some town hall meetings this October to hear more broadly from young people. We did a youth town hall last summer where we heard from young people, and that's just something that is critically important to engage and involve young people in our work. And I know we need to go much deeper, right? We need to do much more in this. And so one of the other areas that we are kicking off this fall is we advertised for a new training and technical assistance provider to help us think about the Second Chance Act reentry grants for young people, and to hire at least 2 young people with lived experience to serve as training and technical assistance providers. So there will be a new training and technical assistance provider selected and announced this September, October. And the first thing that that new training and technical assistance provider will do is to invite young people to apply to serve as one of the 2 youth justice fellows to be embedded in the training and technical assistance. So that those young people will be able to share their expertise with all of our grantees in that space. And then those young people will also benefit by learning new skills, ways of providing training and technical assistance, and getting access to those kind of like coaching and training support. So we think it's a win-win situation. We're excited to get that going, and we hope to expand that to more of our training and technical assistance. And we did that because I felt like young people have a lot to offer, and if they want to be involved in programming and operations of the actual programs that we fund, that might be one way to do it. But we're open to ideas and excited to learn more about how we can partner more effectively with young people. So those are a few of the opportunities. On our website, we can share with you the link to the web page that has that information, and we hope to keep updating it with more ways that young people can be partnering effectively with us.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Administrator Ryan. Can you elaborate on treat children like children? For me, this hits home, as we are in Indigenous communities. We are pretty tightly knit, and all the youth in our community, we all consider our nieces, our nephews, and so this really spoke to me. What experiences in your life had inspired you to treat children like children?
That's such a great question. I'll just say that, my first job when I was 15 was working with children and youth at the local YMCA, where I was a swim instructor and coach. And I just love working with young people and children. And I really, from that experience, learned about the importance of giving young people opportunities to learn, to grow, to thrive, and that all young people need a childhood, and that our criminal justice system essentially criminalizes young people while they're children. And so we want to move away from that. So for me, treat children like children, that really speaks to me in terms of treating children like children. And I feel that to implement that, we need to do a number of things. First is we need to keep kids out of the adult criminal justice system altogether. We should not be sending kids to adult criminal court. We should not be placing them in adult jails or adult prisons. And so doing everything that we can as OJJDP to try to disincentivize that around the country is one approach. Another strategy is really ensuring that we're taking a developmentally appropriate approach in the juvenile justice system when young people come into conflict with the law. We know that the juvenile justice system, while it was adopted 100 or so years ago, the idea really was to have youth justice, right? And to ensure that young people get individualized supports and services, and that rehabilitation is really part of the main goal. But we know that in some places, and far too often, the youth justice system mirrors the adult criminal justice system. So some of the some of the punitive practices of the adult system, over incarceration, inhumane conditions of confinement, over criminalizing individuals for behavior that really isn't necessary to place someone in the criminal justice system. We know that those things are happening in the youth justice system. And so trying to ensure that our youth justice system adopts best practices and approaches and moves away from those kinds of things that mirror the adult system. And then I'd also say that focusing on supporting children and youth during their childhood, what are the things that young people need to grow and thrive? And we know that young people can sometimes be abused by adults. We want to prevent that. We want to provide treatment if a young person has been harmed, so that that young person can access the resources and support needed to grow and thrive. So we have a whole range of things that we do to support that. And so those are some of our ideas, but I know that there are many more ways we can do that. And so part of our effort as OJJDP is to keep listening to the field and learning about more strategies that we can undertake to ensure that we're really living up to the goal of treating children like children.
Thank you so much for that. That was like so beautifully said. So we are all coming to you as ambassadors of the Tribal Youth Resource Center. So we're coming from all over the country, from different Indigenous communities. So we think it's important to educate Indian country on your experience with a lot of like the laws and treaties that we are subject to on a daily basis. So what is your experience with the Indian Child Welfare Act, and how do you envision integrating ICWA to enhance the scope of your work? For instance, enabling Native youth in the juvenile justice system to establish meaningful connections with their respective tribes through the process.
Thank you for that question. I can say that I have limited expertise on ICWA. I mean, I was very happy recently to see that it was reaffirmed by the Supreme Court, and that so the importance of ICWA in our work really is about ensuring that young people are connected to their tribe and to their community. And so I know that youth justice doesn't always do what the ICWA law requires. And so one of the things I've been trying to promote is that there are practices in some localities that are notifying tribal communities when a young person comes into conflict with the law in that jurisdiction or is detained or confined. So recently we did a webinar promoting the practice in Oregon, where they have someone on staff in the state of Oregon's juvenile justice system that when a tribal youth comes into contact with that system, that they make sure the tribe is notified. Now, I know we need to do more than tribal notification, right? Like many of these state and county systems that detain or incarcerate or hold tribal youth are not culturally competent to serve tribal youth. And so we need to do more to ensure that those systems are capable of doing that. And so some of the things that ICWA requires apply and some don't. And so I look forward to learning more about how we can utilize ICWA in our work. The other place where we do utilize ICWA is in our child advocacy centers, which is another approach that OJJDP has funded for roughly 20 or so years, that ensures that when a young person is harmed, that they receive support and services and are again connected to their community. We want to make sure that we're doing that in tribal communities as well. And so for the last few years, we have funded children's advocacy centers in several tribal communities. But I know there's more we can do in this, and I look forward to hearing recommendations on that.
Thank you for your answer there, Administrator Ryan. It was very important to us. Thank you for taking the time to research it, learn more about it, and implement it further. Next, we'd like to know, how are you ensuring that Native youth are being protected from being taken out of our communities in these uncertain times? And how does OJJDP bridge the gap so that tribes can take a more active role in ensuring that our young people stay in our communities?
Thank you, Sydney. So as you may know, OJJDP provides funding resources to tribal communities across the country to implement a juvenile justice program in that particular community. In a number of instances, we have supported tribal healing to wellness courts, tribal healing courts. And that is one way that we support tribal communities in ensuring that young people have access to supports and services in their communities and that they're not removed from the home. OJJDP is one of my priorities as administrator, in addition to treating children like children, is to serve children at home with their families in their communities. And so we're looking at both that particular grant program, but other grant programs to ensure that we're not inadvertently accelerating the removal of children from their homes, and that in fact we are doing everything to try to help young people be connected with their families and communities. I have been very concerned about how the youth justice system has placed children in out-of-home placement across the board. And I know from learning from different communities around the country that a very similar harmful approach has happened with boarding schools. And so these are very similar to me in that children are removed and have limited contact with their families, and that's been a very harmful and painful experience for a very long time. And so I don't want to do anything that would accelerate that or push that forward in the youth justice system. In fact, I want to do the opposite of that. So for me, it's critically important that we're doing everything that we can to keep children at home, that we are supporting both that young person and their family, and that we are supporting the communities in being able to assure those services and supports for young people. I know that we are trying to coordinate our efforts with other agencies within the Office of Justice Programs and within Department of Justice. And so we provide funding support through a broad kind of network of supports through it's called CTAS. And there are different ways that we support tribal communities. But that's just one way that we do that. I think that we also are doing what we can, at least starting with some of the state and local systems, to incentivize them, or at least to start with informing them and incentivizing them to undertake tribal notification, so that they can let a young person's tribe know that that young person has come into contact with their system, and that hopefully there can be a reunification. There is another place where I see tribal youth showing up, and that is in the federal system. It's very small, it's a small number, but in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, there are a small number of young people who have ended up in that system. And I recently was at a juvenile correctional facility in Pennsylvania that contracts with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. And there were several tribal youth in that facility who were from very, very far away, hundreds of miles away. So that's something that I'm talking with the Bureau of Prisons about in terms of looking at their policies and how we can partner with them to keep young people closer to home and at home to the extent feasible, who come into contact with the federal system. And we know, because there are different rules in different jurisdictions, that sometimes a young person can end up in the federal system because they were on federal land, or like a federal park or something like that. So they might end up in that system, whereas in another circumstance they wouldn't. So we need to do more in that space as well. And again, like I said, with everything else that we're doing, this is something that OJJDP is very concerned about and wants to spend more time, devote more resources to supporting, keeping young people at home, including tribal youth.
Thank you for that. And then Ryan, our next question. You've been with us in person a couple times, and those were at the OJJDP National Tribal Youth Conference in San Diego. and at the Unity National Conference in Washington, D.C. From both of those, how have your interactions with youth from both conferences influenced your future policies or future endeavors with Native youth?
Well, both experiences have been just tremendous learning opportunities for me. And I have one of my big takeaways is a sense of urgency in ensuring that we are doing everything that we can to support young people and especially tribal youth. So hearing directly from young people is something that helps bring that authenticity and that sense of urgency about the need to do everything that we can in the work that we're doing. I also have learned a tremendous amount from you all and from other young people who participated in those sessions about concrete policy recommendations, concrete practice implementation, things that we can do. And so we're documenting that information and trying to incorporate that in our programming, in our, what we call it, a program plan, in terms of how we spend our resources and how we also devote our time in terms of research and other things like that. So those sessions have been incredibly valuable. And I'm grateful for the opportunity because it's a lot for people to have to take the time to come together and to put information together. But those sessions were incredibly thoughtful and meaningful. And I know that you all put a lot of time and effort into that. And it's having, I think, a really terrific impact on OJJDP. I also want to share with you that because of those sessions, and most particularly when I first talked with you all last December, it became more apparent the need to have a tribal youth coordinator at OJJDP, and that we need to make sure that all across the agency, not just one division here or one division there. So we will be looking at hiring for that position. And that's something that OJJDP had a long time ago, but hasn't in the last few years. And I feel like that helps elevate the issues and ensures effective coordination and alignment of resources across the agency. The other piece is that we, again, hearing from you all just underscored the importance of tribal consultation. OJJDP hasn't done that in a number of years, and we are going to be doing that this fall with tribal governments. I think we're having 3 sessions. Now we're doing these virtually, which I know is not ideal. The in-person is always better. But I think to ensure that we hear from people, we're going to be doing that. So I think we just put out a note that we're hosting those. So again, I think you all just impressed upon me the importance of addressing concerns raised by tribal youth and the urgency of acting on them.
Thank you, Administrator Ryan. I know before in my question, we talked about ensuring that Native youth are being protected from being taken out of their communities, out of our communities. I recently wrote a paper where I was able to read statistics on, well, I did research too. I found that in the most recent census, Native Americans are finally up to, I think it's 2.9% of the state's or of the United States population. And only about 27% of that represents Native American youth under the age of 18. That very, very small number, that number is very small, but this group of kids lead a lot of the statistics of inequities and disparities in the juvenile justice system, including being like the most likely to be adjudicated delinquent. They're more likely to be placed out of their home without diversion, and even 1.5 times more likely to be arrested. We're just kind of wondering, are you aware of any more of the inequities and disparities that Native youth face in the juvenile justice system? And also, are you aware of the inequities and disparities that Native youth face in the juvenile justice system? And how tribal youth can be more involved in the opportunities you've created for youth, since tribes and states are different?
Great, thank you. So there's a lot to unpack there. Well, thank you. I'd love to read the paper that you wrote, by the way. I think that it's always great if you all are doing things like that for school or other things to share those, because that always helps us, helps educate us. On the disparities, the OJJDP has since 1988 been looking at this. So long before I came on board. And there was a provision that was put into the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Act almost 30 years ago, 1992, that required states to report information on the overrepresentation of youth of color in the system. And I think for many years, states and localities shared this information with OJJDP. So we saw that the data that was reported was that at every point in the system, young people of color, including tribal youth, are much more likely to go further into the system, and that the deeper in the system that you go, the more disparate treatment of young people of color. So one of the areas that then came to light was not just collecting the data on youth, but what are we doing to actually reduce the disparity? And so in 2018, the federal law was updated by Congress and signed into law by the president. And it requires states not only to collect information on young people of color, including tribal youth in the justice system, but to take steps to reduce disparities. And so OJJDP has since that time, since the law was updated, looked at ways to reduce disparities and to work with localities around the country on that. We have done a number of things. One is that we've created a tool, a way that we work with localities to assess what they're telling us. Like, here's the data, this is what these are the disparities, and then what are the ways that they are planning to focus on reducing disparity. And so OJJDP staff work closely with jurisdictions on this, but I know we need to do a lot more. The disparities are actually growing in some instances, and so we've got to double down on this. So one of the things that I did when I came on board was to say we need to have a new kind of emphasis on reducing racial and ethnic disparities, and to do that through bringing on a new training and technical assistance provider to do that. So we expect to be announcing that new training and technical assistance provider focused exclusively on reducing disparities this September, hopefully October. But that's one way that we're doing that. Also, I do think that some jurisdictions have difficulty reporting the data. And so one of our data partners, the National Center for Juvenile Justice, which is located in Pittsburgh, they're the kind of research arm of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, and they produce a lot of our reports on youth justice. And so they're actually going to be providing data collection, training, and technical assistance to localities, so that can't be, to really help them double down on making sure they're getting the data. And so that can't be an impediment to a jurisdiction actually then taking steps to reduce disparity. Because sometimes people will say, well, we don't have the data, so we can't do anything. And we want to make sure, no, you can get the data, we'll help you with that, and here's how you can get help. And then we would work with you on that. Let me mention one other thing. OJJDP many years ago issued a report showing jurisdictions that have reduced disparities and kind of highlighting those as best practices. And we haven't done that in a really long time. And I feel like it's important to really update that, kind of refresh that. So some of the research dollars that we have from this past year, we have invested in the National Institute of Justice, our very strong partners there, to look at what are ways that disparities can be significantly reduced. So we've invested in research there, and they'll be, again, selecting a research partner through the grant cycle this year to undertake that research. We think that that's very, very important to do that. I do think that one way that young people can be involved in this effort is that every state has a state advisory group, and I recognize that tribal communities are independent governments, right? So these are different entities, right? So you don't necessarily if you're a tribal community, you're not necessarily involved in a state's juvenile justice and vice versa. So one of the things that we think is important is that the state advisory groups that are reporting this data to the federal government and looking at ways to implement this are collaborating with tribal communities on these issues. And so that is one space where I see an opening for more collaboration. And I'm hoping that, I know we had a conference last December where we had tribal leaders and tribal young people and programs together in a similar a space right next to where the states are meeting. But I think that we could go a little bit deeper than that, right? And actually do some joint planning together. I see Sydney nodding your head. I think we can do a little bit more to further that collaboration so that we are ensuring we're ensuring that we're making a much more effective partnership there.
Thank you, Edmund Ryan. I did shake my head, but mostly because I've been kind of seeing this as an opportunity there too. After seeing you recently at the Coalition for Juvenile Justice conference in Tacoma, put on by their Emerging Leaders Committee, I got to hear a lot of there, and also in December in San Diego at the conference that we had next door to the Strad side. But I got to hear a lot of great things that SAG members get to do, different things that come out of their committees. And so even just recently this week, I reached out to Diamond to ask how maybe I could learn more about my state's SAG group. And she connected me further with Cassie, and that's been conversation starting.
That's great to hear. I know that's a step in the right direction in terms of connecting people. And I think the connection should go both ways, right? That state advisory group should be reaching out to tribal leadership and young people in their jurisdictions nearby, and vice versa. So it's great that you did that, and I look forward to hearing how that plays out.
Hello, Administrator Liz Ryan. It was good to meet you down in San Diego and here. We meet again. So this next question is, what are your main inspirations that you took away from the OJJDP Tribal National Youth Conference and OJJDP listening sessions at the Unity Conference?
Thank you, James. I think there were a lot of great takeaways from both of those sessions. I learned a lot from many of you on ways that we could really support young people more effectively. Everything from very practical recommendations to things that are bigger, so no recommendation was off the table. So I learned a lot from you all about what would be important. And I also it impressed upon me a sense of urgency and the need to really support tribal youth. I feel like you all have been so active in communicating your perspectives and so organized and putting things together and reaching out, and I want us to make good on what we're hearing from you. And so one of the other things that I feel is very, very important in the work that we do is that we utilize the resources and training and technical assistance that we have to affect some of these issues. So for example, one of the, literally right after I met with you all at Unity, and I think you all said, what are states doing to support tribal youth, and how can we facilitate those connections? I was at a meeting with the Council of Juvenile Justice Administrators, so the state juvenile justice agency heads. And that was one of the first things I mentioned to that group. I said, you all need to think about tribal notification, and I'm going to send you a link to a webinar where we shared best practices on this, and I really want you to think about it. So when you all share stuff with me, I try to incorporate that into the work I'm doing following that, but also more broadly within OJJDP. So your recommendations really help us learn what's needed, and it helps us prioritize the ways that we can be more effective. So thank you for taking that time to come to those meetings and to help us learn.
Thank you so much. Indigenous communities historically have been excluded from conversations regarding the well-being of our people. You have said so many motivating and amazing things today, and you have stressed the importance of uplifting our youth voices and bringing them into your work. How can OJJDP bring us as youth to the table? Furthermore, how can we get more involved and help and do our part?
There are lots of ways I think that we can do that. And some of that are things that we haven't even thought of yet. But I will just say that a couple of things. We want to continue to have a conversation with you and to hear from you as we're doing our work. And I don't want it to just be at the whim of whoever the administrator is. I want it to be something that is operationalized within the work that we do. So it becomes a regular part of OJJDP's business. So it doesn't take, it's just something that we would do as a standard operating procedure. Yes, we always consult with tribal youth and with young people on our work, right? So that's one thing that I want to operationalize. So we are looking at right now all the ways that we're partnering with young people, we're hearing from young people, we're looking at these youth justice fellowships, the peer review, the solicitation language, and thinking about, well, what else can we be doing to operationalize this connection with young people? So I know that when we stand up the Federal Advisory Committee for Juvenile Justice later this year, we plan on doing listening sessions in 2024, and saying every other year we're going to have formal listening sessions. And that's just going to be something that OJJDP does with young people, so that you can expect that of us. And it doesn't, and no matter who's in this role. So that's one thing. I think we also want to make sure that there are more opportunities for young people to advise us, kind of in more formal ways, right, through our training and technical assistance providers. So similar to how the TYRC has tribal youth ambassadors, we think that's an amazing model for engaging and involving young people. And so we're going to do that with our Second Chance Act program, but we want to do that with other programs. So if you have ideas about what those could look like, I'd definitely be interested in hearing more about that. We also think that it's really critically important that the broader field engage and involve young people in this work, right? And so because we have a lot of grantees that are doing this work, we want to train them on how to work with young people, and who best to train them on how to work with young people than young people themselves, right? So we're looking at ways to try to bring young people on board as consultants to be able to advise these grantees, and to kind of, again, operationalize many of the recommendations that people have put forward about how to ensure that there is a table for young people. And then it's not just a token thing. It's not just, oh, you're going to just come and speak and then see you later. Like, no, we want, we're hearing from you and other young people that you want to be meaningfully partnering, not in just a what I would call like a photo op. We just took a picture and then that's it. Like, really, you want to be engaged in more formal ways. So we hear you on that, and we're really thinking that through, or how we're going to do that. One other thing I would say is that there are ways that I think young people can be engaged in youth justice issues in their local communities, right? Taking on leadership roles, like Sydney reaching out to the state advisory group for the state of Washington. That's great. Like, there are, state advisory groups are actually supposed to be connected to all communities in their jurisdictions, and they may not be. So that's another way to kind of get involved there. And then I do think that we think it's important that there continues to be an ongoing dialogue, right, at all levels. So one of the things that many years ago, this mom whose child was tried in adult court, he was 17, he committed suicide in an adult jail. And she started what's called Youth Justice Action Month in October. And so across the field, every October now, there are activities and actions that people can take across the country to really lift up youth justice issues. And so those are things you might think about doing as well during Youth Justice Action Month. And there are other days of the year to take actions on different things too. But that's one thing that you can do in a leadership capacity in your community to help lift up these issues. And so we will be circulating a toolkit around that. And the Coalition for Juvenile Justice also is circulating a toolkit around that. So we're hoping that some of those resources might be helpful to you as you think about not just the ways that you would work with us, but the ways that you would expand your expertise in other places.
Well, Administrator Ryan, thank you so much for really highlighting and having this conversation, really talking about the ways that you are working personally to improve the ways that the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention is actually getting youth feedback, so that way young people can inform how young people are treated. That's always been something that I believe, and my tribe believes, is that, go talk to the people who are actually experiencing it if you want the best feedback and the best policy. And I see that you're really working hard to be able to implement that. So thank you. You mentioned this just briefly a little while back, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about kind of your thoughts on the ways that tribal courts and healing courts and tribal justice systems can be used to, improve the relationship between young people and the juvenile justice system. Kind of ways that you've seen them work, programs that you're leading, or really just any ways that the Department of Justice can help or is helping foster tribal justice and diversion programs.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that is I think that we're investing in tribal youth justice programs through the Healing to Wellness courts. And in fact, recently I had the opportunity to visit one in Winnebago. And it was really impactful. We spent about, I don't know, maybe it was about more than half a day there, and just kind of walking through the programs, learning from the staff, learning from the community, what are the different impacts that court and that work can have on young people. And I was really impressed with the way that they are approaching their effort. And it was really, it was very, very impactful for me. I know we need to do more of that. We need to support more of these courts and by extension, the services and supports that come with that, right? So I think that's critically important. I think that also I want to see more partnership with young people in the implementation of the work, right? And so hearing about your ideas for what can OJJDP do to further the effectiveness of the tribal healing and wellness courts, of what are ways we can really affect that. And then thinking about kind of youth justice programming in communities. Like I know that there's a very strong emphasis on culture as prevention, right? And that is something that we want to really uplift. And how can we uplift that? What are ways we can do that? So we're looking at these things. We're also very interested in trying to think about what are additional connections that we can make. Are there ways that ICWA can be utilized to support young people in conflict with the law? Are there ways that we can highlight, effective policies to ensure that courts are able to operate? All kinds of things like that. So I know that TYRC does a fantastic job of pulling together a lot of these resources and support, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to support them and supporting that moving forward. I also want to operationalize hearing from tribal youth. I think that these sessions I've had with you all have been extremely beneficial to not just me, but to our leadership and staff at OJJDP. We've learned a tremendous amount, and we're really trying to make a good faith effort to implement the recommendations that you all are putting forward. I know we have a ways to go. So I don't want to overpromise what we can do, but I do want to say that we take what you say very seriously and really think about it. So to the extent that there are things you think we can be doing on this front, we would like to know more about that.
Well, I think it's amazing that you guys are looking and focusing on these tribal diversion and tribal justice programs. You know, my tribe, Knightsy, we have the only one in the state of Alaska, and it's a post-plea pre-sentence diversionary program for non-felonies and non-violent crime, generally a court of drug offenses in partnership with the state of Alaska. I don't think we handle any federal crimes, anything that goes into federal court. But one of the things that's happened is that we offer the court, it's open to Native peoples and non-Native peoples, but the recidivism rate is less than 1%. I don't think we've had a single person who's gone through our program that has gone to reoffend. And so I think it's super important and enlightening that your office is seeing the immense effectiveness that the tribes can bring to the table with regards to delinquency prevention, truly. So thank you for putting attention on those important programs and actually being willing to sit down and listen and work with tribes to make that happen. So thank you.
Does OJJDP have partnerships with governmental organizations that involve domestic violence and victims for crime?
Great question. You all have such good questions. So we actually, within our agency, you know, we have a number of agencies that are part of the Office of Justice Program. So OJP's here, and then OJJDP, and then several other agencies, one of which is the Office for Victims of Crime. And Chris Rose, who runs the Office for Victims of Crime, OVC, she and I have been connecting since we both came on board, and I've learned a tremendous amount from her on what kinds of approaches she's taking to ensure that there's access to victim services. And so we're looking at ways we can potentially partner. We recently went to a juvenile detention center together to kind of walk through the detention center, kind of from her lens and from my lens, and so that we could kind of learn from each other the things that she saw when she went into the facility. So I learned a lot from her in terms of her perspective about how to ensure that young people who are crime victims who come into a juvenile correctional facility actually can access services, and even how comfortable they might feel disclosing anything to, you know, the intake officers in that facility. So we're looking at ways to collaborate and ways to ensure we're making victim services available to young people who are justice involved, and then also looking at you know, young people who are not justice involved but who come into the child welfare system. We're also looking at what are ways that we can ensure that people who are involved with the victims of crime resources are involved in juvenile justice. And so there was a provision that was put into the 2018 reauthorization of the Juvenile Justice Act that requires states to have someone on the state advisory group who has expertise in victim services. And so we're working with Director Rose to make sure that that's fully implemented, so that we can make sure that we're connected there. I have not yet had the opportunity to meet with Rosie Hidalgo, who just got confirmed as the director for the Office of Violence Against Women. And I'm looking forward to meeting with her in her new capacity. And I think between OVC, OVW and OJJDP that we are all going to collaborate together on gender-based violence, the gender-based violence strategy of this administration. And so they've already reached out to me to see if we want to be involved. And I, of course, responded right away because I feel like we've got to be at the table to ensure that we're working collaboratively to impact that strategy. So those are a couple of the things that we're doing right now. One other thing I will say is that the Office for Victims of Crime recently sent out a note to the field to say that they're going to be updating their regulations on the Victims of Crime Act. And so it's the VOCA dollars that go out across the country, and that's going to be a very important process. So when those regulations, those draft regulations come out, there'll be an opportunity to provide input onto them and to think about ways that how can people actually access those dollars. So that's coming soon. I don't know the exact timing of that, but I know it'll be hopefully sometime this fall.
Well, something I really appreciate that you do when talking about youth is you're really careful with like saying things like juvenile youth. And I think that's so important because a lot of times, especially for POC, vocabulary has been used to oppress us and demonize us on so many levels. So you say justice involved, and I really appreciate that. And I would ask that you like kind of explain that, because that's like some of the first times that I've even heard that. And I think it's like beneficial for everybody to hear.
Well, I will say that the use of language, you're so right, it can be used in a negative way, and that it's something to try to stay current on. So the way that I stay current is I ask young people, tell me how should I talk about this? What are the words I should be using? And one of the things that I hear from young people all the time is, do not use the word juvenile. I know we have that word in juvenile justice, juvenile court, juvenile detention facility. We use that word everywhere, but would you call your child or someone you love juvenile? You wouldn't call them that. You call them a young person, a teenager, youngster, young person. You would not use that term. And so that's definitely impressed upon me. It's also interesting. Many years ago, when I was doing some commissioning some polling, public opinion polling, I asked people what they thought of that word. And the first thing that comes to mind, what do you think the first thing that comes to mind is when you say the word juvenile?
Like delinquent or like
Yes,
negative.
that's exactly what happens. And that's what most of the public thinks. And so when we use that word, it evokes a very negative impression of a young person, right? When we use that word. So I try never to use that word unless it's an official, like, juvenile justice system. I even say youth justice system, but I try not to use that word. But when I say justice involved, and again, this is something I learned from young people, like the terminology is constantly changing. So I could be, using a term that not everybody uses, but I use justice involved, meaning a young person who may have been arrested, they may have come into contact with the justice system in some way, they may have been in court, they may have been adjudicated, they may be in the criminal justice system, but justice involved doesn't speak to the crime, it just speaks to the contact, right, that they may have had. I've also heard the term a young person with lived experience. And again, that's something that we talk about a lot, young people with lived experience in the system, so that people understand that young person has expertise that they can bring to the table, right? And they're seen as an asset, and they're a person first before anything else, right? So all of the kind of language, offender, convict, prisoner, all of those things, I just steer away from all of those words. And try to focus on the people-centered terminology. But I know that that's something that changes, and that is something that, again, I really take my cue from young people on how to talk about these issues, and young people most directly, right? How do young people identify themselves? And that's what I go with what young people say. And also, let me just say one other thing. Sometimes we use the word child. We say these are children. because we're trying to get adults to understand that these are children, right? But then sometimes young people themselves are like, I'm not a child. I'm 16. I'm not a child. So it's like, so sometimes we can really step in it if we're not careful. So I typically will say young person, youngster, teenager, that kind of thing. But I'd love to hear what terms you all use. That will help me too.
Well, I'm definitely a kid. I have a hard time calling myself a real adult yet, but I'm getting there. I just kind of wanted to circle back. A couple questions ago, you mentioned culture is prevention, and kind of more on that, I wanted to talk about in like my personal experience. And even just if you see the posters around, you'll see the different reasons why culture is prevention. And one of the biggest ones that stuck out to me is it provides healthy coping mechanisms. And off of that, for myself, this last year has been probably one of the hardest years I've ever had to live through. And also the year that I have totally like picked up, flourished, and started even teaching other people how to do Columbia Plateau basketry. And this type of basketry is a dying art, for one, but also traditionally it was taught that you turn your basket, when you're making your basket, you turn it the same way that the earth turns. And in those teachings, for me personally, this last year, I lost my papa right after I got home from San Diego, like a couple days later. And then after that, I started doing my basket classes. And something my papa always said was, life goes on, Sid. And the baskets keep telling me, life goes on. And then further than that, I have aunties like Leanne Campbell, who learns and teaches through the Institute of American Indian Arts out of Santa Fe. And so that might be a place that you guys look into further, like culture is prevention, culture is healing. I don't think it's only for Native kids.
I want to mention two other things before we wrap up. And I know there's more on the agenda here, but I wanted just something you said, Sydney, made me think of this, is that, and I may have mentioned this before, but just in case, I want you all to write down this date, November 19th to 21st, 2024. We are going to do a national symposium in Washington, D.C., where we will be inviting people from across the country. And I think that it would be amazing to have a session on culture as prevention and to provide that to everyone in the field, right? So that for tribal communities and also for people working in state and local systems. And I think that that's an opportunity, that particular convening is an opportunity to involve you all in the design and implementation of that, and to ensure that young people are front and center in that, right? And we want to think through some ideas about that. So I'd love to talk with you more about that, talk with you all more about that. And then the other is next year, OJJDP and the Juvenile Justice Act, we turn 50. I may have mentioned this before, but we are going to be doing sort of a year's worth of activities to really highlight what does that act mean? What does it do? Why is it important? And more importantly, youth justice, right? Let's talk about youth justice and living up to the promise of youth justice for young people. And so hopefully there'll be some ways that you all can be engaged and involved in those efforts. We'll also be putting out information and tools through our website and across the country. And then, it will culminate in the convening, the symposium that we do at the end of the year. But I wanted to just share those two things with you all, because they are both opportunities to engage and partner on how we can lift up some of these very important approaches to serving young people.
Awesome. Yet again, thank you, Administrator Ryan, for your time. And it's been awesome to share this space. And I'd really like to congratulate, or to thank rather, all of our ambassadors here for sharing and putting a little bit of ourselves in here too, being personable. And just wanted to highlight some things that were said during this conversation. I really loved how you said you wanted to keep young people, including tribal youth, closer to home when they come in contact with the justice system. And I wanted to thank you for acknowledging the urgency, the authenticity that we brought to the table. And I really like the idea of when, in terms of training grantees, what better way to train them on how to work with young people than having conversation with young people. And and the culture's prevention, that was a huge one for me. And for me, I wouldn't be the person I am today without my culture, without my language. And these things have helped me propel into my next step in life. And as a kid, you know, I was dealt some pretty rough cards, but with my culture, with my language, I was able to persevere and to still be here today. And so that was very beautiful. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. This has been wonderful hearing from you all, and really having this chance to talk. And I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Administrator Ryan, once again, thank you so much for being able to take the time today and have this conversation and this dialogue. A lot of the times when it comes to the divide between young people and tribes and the federal government, people don't understand who we are. We can't trust them because they haven't shown us why we should trust them, and they don't understand how we live or why our cultures and our ways are important. With your appointment to OJJDP, it's clear that there is somebody now that does understand the importance of our tribes, our traditions, our culture, and our young people. And so thank you for being somebody who fights to make sure that, our young people are treated the way that they need to be, that they get what they deserve, and that the justice system is fair and actually pursues justice rather than just locking somebody away. And so thank you very much. And as I close this out, I want to reflect on something that was taught to me. We may look like a group of children, a group of young people, but where I come from the Bering Sea. I don't know, it's kind of funny, but if you've ever seen Deadliest Catch, that's where we're from, a little island out in between Russia and the US. And we've been there for about 20,000 years in one of the harshest climates on the planet. In the summertime, it doesn't get that hot, but in the wintertime, it'll get to 70 and 80 below zero. And we've survived there, and not only survived, but we've thrived. And the reason that we've been able to do that is that our culture is based on the learnings of those who came before us. We didn't just plop down there, we were brought up there. And we were able to survive in the knowledge that we accrued over tens of thousands of years of existence is what allows and has allowed us to thrive where we are. And so each of the Native young people that you see is not just a manifestation of their parents and their grandparents and their grandparents' parents, but of tens of thousands of years of resilience. And the reason why we are able to even exist today is because of our cultures and because of our traditions and that knowledge and power that is imbued in us from generations upon generations of people who are unwilling to bend to this natural world, who are able to survive against all odds, and who are able to thrive wherever they went. When we deal with our justice system, something as immutable as the US government, it can be a scary thing. And it is something that can at times go too far. But we're proud to have you as the stanchion by which makes sure that we are able to be served properly, that our communities are able to be improved by a system that's intended to improve them, and that our young people have an advocate, somebody who understands what it means to be Native, somebody who understands what it means to have a good interaction with the justice system, somebody who understands what it means and the gravity of what can happen if that interaction is not good. And so thank you for administrating and heading up OJJDP. And thank you for ensuring that, you know, our tribal children get what they deserve and our voices are heard. Thank you.